Hey man, thanks so much for doing this.
My pleasure.
I
Thank you
really
for.
appreciate it, man.
Yeah,
I, w-
yeah.
I, I was looking at all your credits. It's crazy, dude, how much stuff you've worked on. My God, man.
Because I'm not young. That's why. You do it long enough, it looks impressive. Yeah.
I was actually listening to what is it that is a Canyon
Oh,
remember that
Echo in the.
yeah. I was listening to that the other night, and then when I was going over what you did, I was like, oh my God, you mixed that, and I didn't know you mixed it, and I love the sound of that. It's a great
Yeah.
sound.
Oh,
And
we actually recorded a bunch of it here too. Yeah.
oh
So
really?
yeah, yeah. Yep.
Wow. It sounds great. Like the low end
Thank
on
you.
that is really cool.
Yeah. Yeah, that was a fun one to do. It started off as just a record.
Mm.
And later, who ultimately became the director, but at the time he was just the producer, and he manages Jacob. And he had this idea of, he loves that music. That's like his. I've known him for 30 years, and he's a huge fan of that era and those bands, those people, and he had this idea of doing a covers album of that stuff, and we started it, and we got Jacob involved and some other guests, and so it was just a record, and then in the age we're in, just putting out a record seemed like not enough. So
Yeah.
I think we need to make some kind of a promo thing, and get
Uh-huh.
some people, and then all of a sudden that turned into the idea of turning it into a full-on documentary. Once you started getting some of the
Uh,
bigger guests like Eric Clapton and you know Neil Young and guys like that. Once they got kind of involved, it took on its own life, and then
cool.
and then we shot the concert and all this stuff. So yeah, it was fun.
So you recorded some of that in your studio, yeah?
Yeah, the record stuff is pretty much all in here.
Oh, that's interesting. So you recorded I Just Wasn't Made for These Times by the Beach Boys, that
Yeah, yeah,
version.
yep.
Oh, cool. What was that like trying to get the kind of, the Wrecking Crew and that sound of Sunset and Western and all that?
Yeah, what we tried to do was to get sounds of that era, right? To not kind of do strict covers of each song, but
Okay, yeah.
be inspired by the sounds and you know the, the style of those records. And
Yeah.
so we would just use a lot of the small drum kits and lots of chamber reverbs and plates and the background vocals were a big part of it for some of the songs.
Mm.
Uh, yeah, but we would, so we tried to just make you feel like that was a cover, like it was a song that could have come out of that. And then if you compared it to the original, you'd be like, oh, that's actually very different, but it sounds like it's from the same time.
Yeah. Have you ever used that? There's a Sunset Sound plugin by IK Multimedia. It's
Yeah,
unreal, dude.
yeah,
It's
I know.
so cool. Like
Yeah,
I do put that on my master bus, and I kind of, because I'm like kind of recording in a little tiny place. So I put it on my master bus and put it like 20% or something like that. And then everything runs through it. And it kind of gives it does give a kind of cool sound. It's not like a typical kind of reverb or, I know it's a convolution kind of thing, but it,
yeah.
it does give a kind of sound to it, cohesive kind of thing, which a lot of reverb doesn't.
Sunset
That makes
Greats. I love that studio. I'm
Well, what's,
actually, well, I've been working on a project recently where we spent a good amount of time at Sunset. We were
oh,
doing it
wow.
on tape, so there's
Cool.
not that many rooms around now that have the capability and the knowledge because uh, you know there's a lot when you're talking about synchronizing with other with Pro Tools and getting it all locked the right way. It's
Yeah.
not as you think, and there's only a few rooms that can kind of handle going back and forth like that. So Sunset's one of them.
When you walk into the studio like that, can you like, is there a vibe? There has to be a vibe when you just go in, you're like, oh, fuck, there's like a vibe of being in there.
Sunset actually has a very chill vibe. It's like
Right.
it's kind of very unassuming, as opposed to like Capitol. You walk in Capitol and you feel like you're in a temple where you're very aware of, and it's part of a big corporation too, so it's a different thing. But Sunset, you walk in and there's a little courtyard with a basketball court and
Oh, cool.
flowers and stuff, and the you walk in. We were just working in Studio One, which when you walk in, you turn to the right, and that has so many great records made in there: the Stones and Zeppelin and the Doors, and all these iconic rock albums. And it's just chill. It's not huge.
Yeah.
There are not huge rooms there, um, like East West or some of the bigger rooms. But man, it's just got a sound. It's got a great sound, and they've been smart enough to not mess with it. It's I'm sitting here today doing an Atmos mix of Macy Gray's "I Try," which I recorded it, and well, I didn't mix it at Sunset, but we recorded it at Sunset like 25 years ago.
Wow.
I think that was my first time working there, and I can tell you the place has not changed absolutely one bit. Mick,
Really?
Mick, the tech, the main, the chief engineer there, same.
That's cool.
And he's one of those guys. He's like, yeah, he's seen it all. He's done. He knows all the old tricks and everything that's needed. So makes it easy. Sometimes you get into some newer rooms and they're like, oh, you wanna use a Lynx to, okay, you want the tape machine to be the master, not Pro Tools. Oh, okay. Let me. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. Shit, man. I always kind of feel like I missed all that kind of stuff. Like I grew up where I grew up small, tiny, like west of Ireland, little village, like that. And by the time I kind of got to 18, 19, all the studios started to close and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So it's kind of shitty to see that because there's they do impart a sound and a vibe and stuff like that. And there's,
Oh yeah. They're
you know,
they're for that sound, whatever it might, like obviously the chambers at all these places are very, unique and one of a kind. Now there's plugins that you can get them too. Thankfully, they're great. I think the Capitol Chambers plugin is great. I don't know if you've used that one.
yeah.
Uh, and get, I think East West has their chambers. I think, or at least I have Altiverb impulses of
Mm.
those. But Henson's another one. We when we were doing Echo in the Canyon, we wanted to kind of pay homage to all those rooms, and that's so we're in each of those, the Sunset and Capitol and East West and uh, uh, geez Christ, what used to be Ocean Way.
Is Western still there, no?
Yeah. Well, United and Western is what is now East West,
Oh,
and
okay, okay.
United is what was formerly Ocean Way, and before that, uh, United Western back in the old days. United,
Okay.
but that's what it is now. It's United again.
So
So, but that's
what was
pretty much down. You can't book. Well, you can only. The story is you can only book United if you're in there for a month at a time or something like that. There's no like small bookings.
Oh, okay. And
Yeah.
what's the sound of Capitol like? 'Cause I know Brian Wilson when they were doing, the Capitol artists used to have to record in Capitol, and he left there to go to like Western and well, I said Western, but and Sunset and stuff like that. Like he kind of wasn't too fond of that sound.
A lot of the studio is different then. One of the things that's not changed is the chambers. But Brian Wilson will talk about this, and all the guys, Phil Spector and all the kind of engineers. You would book a room based on what kind of a lot of times the echo chambers, and
Uh-huh.
so like Phil Spector loved Gold Star's echo, and that was a big part of his sound, and so he was working there, all the time. But Capitol has great chambers, and again, they've not messed with them for decades. So
Uh-huh.
you dial up that, put that on your vocal, and you're like, oh man, this just sounds like Frank Sinatra. How does that
Oh, that's
happen?
savage, dude.
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
savage. You were saying about Macy Gray, I try. I was listening to that today. That mix is so good.
Oh,
It's
thanks.
so good, man. Like everything's so like perfectly placed in it. You know what I mean? Like everything like that, and it's so glued together, and it's not like over compressed or anything like that. It just but it sounds tight as well. You know, it just sounds
Uh-huh.
so good, man. Like how are you going about like mixing that in Atmos? Do you have to like deconstruct the whole thing or
Yeah. I mean, no, I have to reconstruct.
reconstruct?
But
Recon-
but it's not as bad. That album, and this is common for records from that era, the '90s and early 2000s, when we were working still on. Hold on, I'm gonna get a picture here. Hold on. Uh, so here's I'll hold it up and you can see. But here we are. This is that Sunset Sound,
Ah, cool.
and that's Andy Slater, the producer. There's Macy, and there's a young me. Now you can see there's 3 tape machines back there.
Uh-huh.
Right. This is in Studio One, the room I was just talking about, and there is another Studer over here that's not in the picture. So we had 4 24-track tape machines locked up for the mix.
Wow.
Yeah, because that record went on and on and on as far as overdubs go. Um, we just kept putting stuff on and putting stuff on, and it's not like in Pro Tools where so we would make slave reels, which were like you'd have your master reel that you cut the basics on, and so say you filled up, you fill that up, you fill up 22 tracks because you got Simpty and a guard track on 23 and 24.
Uh-huh.
Uh, but so say I had probably, well, I could look, but I think I had about 8 tracks of drums on this, right? And then bass, piano. I had 3 piano tracks. There was a stereo mics, and then a Telray. Do you know what a Telray Echo is?
Uh-huh.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that we put some of that on the piano, and that was printed.
Ah,
Then there were
cool.
Tubular Bells that also had some Telray. We were really into the Telray at the time, and but we would have like 3 different piano players come in and play piano. I think on I Try we must have had probably 5 guys play piano. There was Patrick Warren, Jeremy Razumna, who was a co-writer on that, played it on the tracking date.
Uh-huh.
Then Patrick Warren played piano. Then John Bryan played piano. Then I remember Greg Fillinganes played piano. Uh, and I'm probably missing somebody else. Who am I forgetting? There's somebody else that played piano and I think it ended up being Jeremy's piano, I think, on that, which was the original tracking. So,
Oh.
and that kind of tells you like a lot of what it was like, where we'd have something that was great,
Yeah.
but oh, could it be better? Well, this guy's really great. Is it? I'm trying to think if it was Jeremy's. It might have been John Bryan's piano. I can't remember, honestly, because unfortunately, the transfer that I have, because it was all transferred onto digital,
Uh-huh.
doesn't have a track sheet. Now I know what everything is because I remember,
Okay.
but it doesn't even say piano. It's just they're all just numbers. So
Right.
yeah. So the fact that it has Telray on it makes me think it's John Bryan. So it might be John.
That's
Yeah.
cool. Oh, yeah, I
Anyway,
got John
but
Breeden on the
the
record.
mix took a long time on that record. It was a bit because the mix process was like that too. Well, what if we tried this? What if we tried mixing it on this console and then instead of that console? And I Try in particular, I think I mixed that probably 20 times.
Really?
Well, maybe
Wow.
not completely over, but I'd say I know we mixed it at Henson. and then on the Neve console, and then we mixed it at Henson on the SSL console, and then we mixed it at Sunset in that room there. That might actually be from my Try Mix. I don't know. So I mixed it on at least three different. Then I did a mix at Larrabee Studios on an SSL-J console. So at least four separate kinds of mixes, mainly just to see how the console interacted with it.
Okay.
The one that we ended up doing was the last one we did, where I think we went back after all those. We went back to Sunset. Back to Henson in the Neve room and did it again in there. That was the final mix.
Oh wow, that's cool.
Yeah,
Was there much like difference in like I know they are different, but the SSL and the Neve, they're very different sounds. Was
yeah,
it
yeah. Very
m-
different. I mean, and I
S
listen to it now, and that sounds like a Neve console. And this is kind of a one of a kind custom Neve console that was built for Jeff Emerick and George Martin,
Whoa.
70s. Yeah, and it was at Air Montserrat for a long time, and then
Wow.
it moved to Henson. And actually, I tried might have been one of the last sessions on that console, because I remember, like, within months of us finishing that record, because it was A&M when we were working there, and then it got sold, became,
Uh,
and uh, that console was gone. So
oh,
I don't even know where it is now. But
damn.
yeah, and actually Henson's been sold again since then. Now John Mayer bought it just a few months ago with
Oh,
a film partner of his friend of his. Uh,
cool.
McGee is his name. Yeah.
Is it Mick Cheese?
No, McG,
Oh,
MC.
okay.
Yeah,
Okay. Oh,
that's
cool.
how he pronounces it. Yeah. But they bought it, and I don't know if it's gone through yet, but I think it has, because I think they announced it once it had gone through. But I haven't been back
Okay.
there. I was just there a couple of months ago before
Hmm.
before the change.
Do,
Anyways, I'm
do,
thankful that I still get to work in these rooms sometimes, because
yeah.
it's great.
I'd say it's a
Beautiful.
completely different process of kind of going from being in the studio all the time. Because if you're in the studio, I'm sure there's a thing of like, you have to wait for the tape to rewind. So you kind of can talk and then different ideas formulate. Whereas now in a DAW, you can just do it instantly. I
Yeah.
sometimes think that everything instant is kind of bad. We live in this very instant thing and there's no kind of
I
time to kind of stop.
Yeah. I mean, when I'm working, or at least more so when I'm mixing, I find it very useful to take lots of breaks. Just like, don't get too inside of it for too long.
Yeah.
Uh, you know, an hour is good. 2 hours is kind of at the point where it's like you got to just take a break.
Yeah.
And I think when we had tape and those little 5-minute gaps in between, you got that all the time, so you didn't kind of get as lost as quickly, because
Okay.
sometimes you just get so in the weeds that you're really missing. You can't see it from the big, overhead, and I find that's for mixing. That's the most valuable um, tool, is
Hmm.
perspective. You know,
Yeah.
like
Would it be? Sorry. Oh,
today,
sorry to
but
interrupt you.
doing a mix and then listen to it the next day, immediately I know it's like, okay, these 5 things, that'll be it. That's all I got to do, is more echo on the vocal, and bring this up and turn that down and take that out. And maybe I have an edit idea or something like that. And it's like all those come in the morning. As soon as you hear it, you're like, yeah, what was I doing till 3 left? Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Plus, do you think also mixing has changed because if you think about it, most people have desks, and a desk isn't as big as a monitor, or sorry, as a console, and the console, the speakers will be way further away from you, and if you're kind of close to speakers, it does change the way you kind of hear sound. Do you think
Yeah.
that's changed the way people as mix too, like nowadays?
Yeah. I mean, that, there's always been different perspectives on that too, because you go to most of these old studios and there are big soffit mounted monitors,
Uh,
very expensive always, and then you've got the shelf on top of the console where you have your near fields. So I mean, I've still basically got that. My bigger speakers, and they're not, they're not big, then they're not soffit mounted, but they're further away, and then
uh,
near fields that are like very much closer, and they're pretty wide apart now. Whereas I used to have them kind of closer, more in front of me. But I kind of like when you're that close to them, it's cool. It's almost like headphones when they're pretty far apart. Like now they're about 5 feet apart, maybe almost 6 feet, I guess 6 feet. And it's funny back in the studio days, and even when I was working here, but in stereo, when I was just working in stereo, I had lots of monitors that I would switch between. I'd have like 5 or 6 different sets of speakers that I would switch, and some would be over on the side so that I'm not listening, like this, like an engineer, you know what I mean? Uh, and um, and also one of the things I find valuable too is um, just like I spend a good deal of time towards the end of a mix. I go out in the live room over here and just listen to it from out there, where I'm not hearing panning, I'm not hearing uh micro details. I'm just seeing how it fills up the room. How is the bass, how vocal, how are the drums, how are the key, instrumental things that need to poke out, are they poking out? It's kind of the equivalent of listening very low when you're just trying to see if the key ingredients are cutting through. I
yeah.
don't know, sometimes I'll go outside, listen outside. um, but getting different monitor perspectives I find really useful, because and then you have your monitors that you trust, or headphones that you really trust. But um, I find it just kind of inspiring when you hear it somewhere else. You're like, oh, that makes me want to do this. It just kind of gives you a little different look at it.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And how volume wise, how low would you mix? Do you mix very high, or do you mix kind of middle
No,
wise? Or
middle to low. I rarely blast it.
yeah, yeah.
Maybe at the end just to see, uh, and not even that. Like I've been in the room with people who blast it. I mean, make us blast it. It was loud. He'd say hurt, and then we crank it up. But no, I find listening at a very low volume better for the reasons I was just talking about. You're able to just kind of hear the most, are the most important elements making it. Are they
Yeah,
selling? And it seems to work. Like works seems to work well.
yeah. And like the bass interacts differently as well when you kind of when you're listening at
Yeah,
low levels. It's not kind
yeah.
of
That's like, and then one of my last checks usually is just on the iPhone to make sure I can hear the bass. Because
okay.
you got to be able to make out what the bass is doing
Yeah,
when
yeah,
it's
yeah.
coming out of the speakers.
Did you? I seen. Did you work with? You worked with Van Dyke Parks. Was that with Ringo when he was when you were recording Ringo?
No, actually. Well, I worked with Van Dyke on a Louise Goffin album that I worked on.
Ah, okay.
This was probably about, well, let me think. I remember it was 2017. Yeah, yeah. So, yeah, Van Dyke did a couple of arrangements, and we recorded them at the Village, and he did 2 songs, and that was a trip. I mean, Van Dyke comes up with the craziest stuff, man. I don't know. There's so many ideas and
Yeah.
so much value packed into each bar. You know what I mean? It's like, and I've done some other like event kind of things where he's been in the band or something, and uh, he's he's amazing, and he's an
Totally.
amazing storyteller too. It's
Oh
great to just
yeah.
go and tell stories.
Oh yeah, man. He's a dude. He's a total dude. I love his records, Song Cycle and Jump. Like those two records are amazing. Like just
Yeah, those are fairly far back, right?
yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
Jump is like it's 84 and I think Song Cycle's 67 or something like that, you know.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
but still an amazing record. Like it
Oh
just
man.
sounds so good. Like man.
Yeah,
I don't always like listen to those old records and you like some of them record on 4 track and 8 track and you're like, how it's so
yeah,
amazing.
yep,
So amazing. You kind of had to be a good player. I think it's
yep,
recording has changed the way people kind of even interact with music because they kind of think that like fix it in the mix kind of thing. And I think that's changed the way music
yep,
is being produced, you know?
yep. And written. I mean, because you know, in this day and age, the recording process is very much, it's common for it to be part of the writing process. And you know, I'm a big fan of the older I get, the more, or probably more, the more records I've made.
Uh-huh.
I really value that era when you basically you didn't get into the studio until you had an act and you it was honed and you had amazing arrangers, or you had songwriters, you had arrangers, and you had singers,
Mm.
so and you had bands when they existed were that they were self-contained with all those elements. They would usually do songs that were written by songwriters. Back then it was uncommon for someone in the band to write the songs.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, Benny Goodman didn't write songs, and well, I guess he did, but you know what I mean. Like band leaders didn't they weren't songwriters. It was an
Yeah.
era where songwriter was somebody separate, and Irving Berlin sat in a little room. But I love records before about 1965, or say 60 at the earliest, before overdubs, before tape machines enabled people to really um, create the illusion of a performance. It was
Oh,
before
I
then,
get you.
performance that was recorded.
Uh-huh.
The word record comes from making a record, a timestamp of something that was happening at a particular moment, and it was for the record. And this happened on this day at this time, and there was really no mixing process too. You just recorded it, and maybe they would make a kind of mastering kind of tweaks in order to get it on vinyl.
Uh-huh.
Um, but there was really no mixing, there was no overdubs, and you came out of it. You went in, spent whatever, a couple of hours, and you were done. You had an album, and you know, and then it was on
Brilliant.
the radio weeks later.
Yeah, yeah. It's like you listen to those old like Nat King Cole records. They sound incredible. I was listening to one of
Great.
them the other day, and it just like the orchestra, is, like like he used to sing live, and he's almost compressing his voice.
Yeah,
Like they would do in the old days. And like I read Sinatra as well. That when he did with like one take, he was like, "That's it, I'm out of
yeah,
here." It's
yeah,
incredible.
yeah. Yep. It
So good.
you weren't good if you took more than two times to get it right. That's how you kind of valued being a professional and being able to just there was no mucking around, and there was not a lot of experimentation. you
Yeah.
know and they not that they wouldn't come in, and Frank might would say, hey, you know what, let's work on this, bars 32 to 35 here, that seems a little weird, let's change something there.
Yeah.
And but you do it on the spot and adjust, done. uh and like I
So
said,
good.
there was no mixing really when you were done. They printed it with reverb. I just did some Dean Martin Atmos mixes of a Dean Martin
Oh
Chris.
wow.
Yeah, and it's all 3 tracks, and for the most part, well, some of them were 4 track, but for the most part, it's the whole band, on one track, and then Dean on another with live on the floor. You can hear the leakage of the band going into the vocal mic. And then
Brilliant.
track 3 would be either a string. Sometimes it was live, but most of the time it was an overdub string session or an overdub background vocal session.
Uh-huh.
So you basically had Dean and the band recorded it, and then they would do one overdub, and so if it was 4 tracks, sometimes they would have the background vocals live, and then the strings overdubbed, or sometimes, but anyway, it was like one overdub kind of era.
That's
And
amazing.
yeah, but Dean's vocals are perfect,
Yeah.
and the band is perfect. Everybody, I don't know how many takes they would do, but I'm guessing 3 or 4, at the most. Then their
Wow.
next song.
Wow. So what like I've never heard Atmos. I know about it, but I've actually never heard it. Like what is it like listening to it? Is it like totally like 3D or immersive or what
Yeah,
is it?
I mean, on speakers, it's amazing. I mean,
Really?
yeah, I pretty much do everything I'm mixing in stereo now. I do Atmos at the same time, so
Ah.
love it. You can see behind me, there's 2 speakers up there.
Yeah.
Here, I'll give you a little tour here. Well,
Oh, cool.
so I've got 2 up at the
Uh,
front. There's left, center, right back
uh-huh.
there, and then there's some subwoofers. There's some LFE subwoofers back there. I don't know if I can show that. And then
That's cool.
there's 2 on the sides here, 1 and 2, and then in the back of the room, 2 more. Right,
Oh
so
yeah, wow.
7.1.4. There's 4 overhead. Point 1 is for the subwoofer, the LFE, and then there's 3 in the front, 2 on the sides, 2 in the back.
Oh
Um,
man.
and I love Atmos. Uh, I feel cheated when I'm going back just to stereo.
No
But
way. Oh wow, that's interesting.
yeah,
Hmm. I
now
gotta check it out.
yeah, check it out on speakers. There's headphones. If you have Apple Music or Amazon or Tidal, any of those,
Right.
Spotify. Spotify. Well, do they use Spotify in Ireland, or is
Oh
that?
yeah, yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Um,
We get lovely Spotify with their
yeah. Well,
lovely
Spotify doesn't
royalties.
have Atmos yet, but Apple Music. But if you've got Apple Music, you've got Atmos on your phone right now, and you can listen on headphones
Okay.
to, to tens of thousands, if not, I don't even know, hundreds of thousands of songs, I'm sure.
S-
Yeah.
So what's it like mixing for Atmos? Like what do you actually have to do? You're putting things in
Besides
different
the
places.
good stuff, that's what's the
Yeah.
tough. There's a lot of good. Yeah.
Is it harder to do with say you've got a 3 track like that Dean Martin one? Is that easier or harder?
Well, that's a different thing, because you really don't have many options, right? And but basically what we did was um, uh, go to East West Studios, which is the big room there, which is where they actually recorded some of Dean Martin and Frank Sinatra and records of that time. That was the old Western studios,
Yeah.
uh, the big room there. And I'd take if there were 3 tracks, I'd take each track and pump it up out of the speakers in the big rooms, nice bigger ATCs, and I'd have these mic arrays. The first day I did it, I was doing another song, "Everybody Loves Somebody Sometime," which is one of his biggest hits, and just pump it out into these different arrays. I had a ribbon mic array. It was like 8 mics, and then a condenser, large condenser array, and then I had this other microphone by a company called Core Audio, that makes it like a it's an immersive mic that has 8 elements in it, and it's just like a Dante cable that connects to it. It's great.
Oh,
They're really good, actually. And so I would pump each track out and record the ambience that I would then put that ambience. I chose whether or not I wanted to use the ribbon mics or the condensers or the core, and use that as ambience basically.
Right.
And kept the very basic panning, because the panning on the actual records, the stereo versions, are the band is over on the right, the background vocals or the strings are over on the left, and the vocal is right in the middle. And then I also use the plates and chambers on the vocal, and I would spread those out like different plates, different chambers into different spaces for the
Oh,
vocal.
cool.
Yeah,
Wow. That's
yeah,
class.
fun. But
That's class.
that's an an idea that my buddy Steve Genowick, who does a lot of Atmos mixing, he's kind of probably done more than anybody. And like my first Atmos mix, I called him. I said, Steve, you got to help me on this. And, but he does all the Blue Note records, jazz records.
Oh, wow.
He and Don Was came up with this kind of treatment for treating those where you're not, really messing with the basic panning and because they're all from the same era, like 3 tracks for the most part. And so you're just adding in this realistic, very hyper realistic ambience to it, where you feel like you're actually in the room. And it works well because when they were doing stereo records back then, not so much on this Dean record, but on the Blue Note stuff, they would use stereo in a way that we now think of using Atmos, where it's like, okay, no, the saxophone player's over there and the drummer's over there, and the bass player might be over there with the drummer, and the piano and saxophone are over here. So it was a lot more left, right, center. And a lot of the back then, you didn't actually have variable in between panning. You basically just assigned it to either left or right or center. That was
Right.
it.
Yeah.
Panning. So
So you don't put the drums in the middle in an Atmos, so you can just put it over like almost like old Beatles records too, when they're the
yeah. Well, it always depends on the music and the style, but I for most records, I'll still keep the drums in the front, right, and coming out of mostly left, right, and then like snare and kick drum and stuff in the center. But not always. Sometimes I'm bleeding it out into the room more and putting it in the height speakers somewhat to give it a bigger presentation, but still front forward. But there's some music that particularly when I was first doing Atmos, it was I had these kind of grand ideas of really like getting rid of this front loaded idea of you're looking this way and that's where the music is, and then things would tickle your ears from the back and the sides and the top. And I wanted to put lots of vocals in the back and the bit, bass and things that normally wouldn't be in the front, but it's not as practical as I thought it would be. Right. Things kind of fall apart easier when you're doing that. It depends on if the music really lends itself to that. Like there's a great Atmos mix, one of my favorite ones, of "Tell Me Something Good," Chaka Khan, and remember that song. It's like everybody's in a different place timing wise, like the drums and the vocals and got, and so they have the drums in the front, but Shaka's vocals are in the back speaker and the clavinets like over here, and it's like so everything's kind of bouncing front to back in a way that's really cool. And but that that music, that song in particular, lent itself to that kind of a treatment.
Yeah. So you can do like really kind of interesting things. So is some of it like binaural music? When you hear binaural recordings and they're like can be just kind of there. Yeah.
Atmos thing. Yeah. We're actually listening to and sometimes delivering a binaural version of the Atmos mix. That's kind of what spatial audio, and what spatial audio is Apple's term for Atmos, and their kind of treatment of it is proprietary to them, to the Apple
Okay.
ecosystem. But it's basically a binaural representation, and it's
Okay.
got um, but binaural as a mic technique works really well in Atmos. I've found.
Okay.
Yeah, like I've done some recordings. One of my first ones was a Hawaiian record where I had the K100, or was it KU100, the head, the Dolby Fritz head, um, uh, in the middle. It was a live recording, and everybody's kind of in a circle. I placed everybody where I knew I wanted to pan them. I think, over the next 5 years, it's funny because, I've been doing it for about 5 years now. And if you had asked me 5 years ago where Atmos would be now,
Yeah.
I would have expected more people, because you're very knowledgeable about music and the technical side of things, and this, and you haven't really gotten to hear it yet, and
Yeah. Yeah.
people out there, and so many people I talk to who have not even ever heard the word Atmos. I have no idea what I'm talking about. And or they've heard about it, but they don't know what it is, and they're confused, and they've never gotten to hear it on speakers. So my hope is that by 5 years from now, that will be a different situation. It's funny because we just had an immersive event out here. Mix Magazine had an immersive event,
Yeah.
and so all of us engineers are talking about all this stuff. And somebody pointed out that stereo came out in 1957, right? It was introduced. And we all famously know that 1967, the Beatles, Sergeant Pepper, they're still mixing in mono, and stereo is just an afterthought. The band wasn't even involved. They were like, yeah, we have to do this for the label. It's kind of like expected. And but still, mono was very much a big deal 10 years after it was introduced, after stereo was introduced. And it wasn't until 1977, 20 years after stereo was introduced, that they stopped releasing mono. So
Oh.
that made me kind of look at this, changeover into Atmos differently. And I thought, it takes a long time for something like this to really uh, become a new format. So it's
Yeah.
not D. It's a different thing. It's not like when we went from vinyl to CD. It's more like when we went from mono to stereo.
It's like a lot of people like you who I know are famous mixers that I've talked to, and they're like, they don't listen to it in Atmos or haven't heard it like you were saying. So it's kind of like that thing. It probably will get to a point. I still listen to the Beatles in mono because I think
Oh,
that's the
you do?
best way. It's still, I don't care what anyone says. It's still, the punch
Uh-huh.
is still there. I do find some of the, even the remix stereo stuff, it doesn't have that punch, like like
Yep.
that like just that kind of punch,
Yeah.
and it still
There
sounds
is
kind of
something,
wide.
and it just really has to do with the fact that it's all coming from one point source. And and that punch is the word, because it's only coming from one place. As soon as you spread it, a phantom center
Yeah.
from two sources, the room and the timing of, and any, all these things come into play that can smear it,
Uh-huh.
that, and when it's just coming out of one place. So yeah, but there's a trade-off for that. The punch, you
Yeah.
get the mono, but you don't get, this treat for your ears that stereo brings, and Atmos brings even more so.
Yeah, I think something like that MAL technology that they have now,
Yeah,
that
but
machine learning technology.
the,
I think
for
that'll
the,
probably change.
yeah,
Yeah, that'll change a lot because you'll be able to get like that punch of like taking stuff and also mono in it and then spreading things out and stuff like that. I think that's going to
yeah.
change the way a lot of stuff with music. How do you feel about AI in music?
Yeah, this is an interesting topic. You know, in 2025, we're talking about Atmos. You're not allowed to break out. Like, we have all these tools, and they're not the Peter Jackson tools, but you have other websites or plugins where you can separate,
Yeah.
the or the vocal from something, and we're very much close to being able to get really good, high quality stem separation from a stereo source record or any a mono source record recording. And then, if you're able to do that, then you can then do these remixes and put stuff everywhere. Right now, that's not allowed in Atmos world. You're not allowed to extract the elements and then remix it um, with AI. Um, but that's not going to stand for too long. And once that
No.
kind of cat is out of the bag, just being able to go to town on anything you hear, anything you've got a recording of, is going to be incredible. Um, so we can't stop it. That's the thing. We really
No.
can't.
Yeah, it's not going back in the bag, so to speak. It's just that's just the way those things always are. It is interesting though when you separate some of it, because I've done those separating some of the stuff, and you see it's how loose some of those records actually sound. Not everything is on the grid, which I like. I hate that kind of thing of modern, that
Yeah.
everything's like gridded. It takes away the feeling of everything, and everything's
Yep.
125 beats, and it's just like
Yeah.
that
Tempo
flow.
changes. There's no more tempo changes in songs. It used
Yeah,
to, and key changes for the most part. Like all these devices that we have as songwriters and musicians and arrangers, they've just thrown it out. Because it's just easier if the computer just tells me to play at this tempo all the time, and it's just the same beat all the way through. It's like, what fun is that? I don't,
yeah.
that's like not music. And what's even scarier is that there's generations, more than one at this point, who have grown up who have no idea what the concept of changing the beat and the tempo and the time signature and the key is foreign to them. They don't even think that you can do that. If you did it, it would be like, what are you doing?
Yeah. Yeah, it's so weird when you go back and listen to like a lot of older beats. I know I touched on the Brian Wilson, the Beach Boys, but like in pop music, God I knows, for example, he's modulating and doing these like really interesting modulations in songs, and they're extremely catchy, and they're also commercial. And
Yeah.
there's, I think the record labels have a lot to blame with that, because first off, they don't want to build artists. They get one try in it, they're gone. And secondly, it's like everything that's kind of commercial now is like four chords. It's the same four chords, and everything. Like if you took a track from 1967 and then took a track from 1977, they sound different production wise. If you take a track from 2015, 2025, there's not a big gap in terms of
I
sound.
would say it's really not. I mean, look, I've been making records for 30 plus years,
Yeah,
and it's basically the same for pop music now. It's just, we use Pro Tools instead of an MPC 60 or whatever, but it's still 808s and sequenced cut and paste form.
yeah.
There's really no difference.
Mm.
And the labels might have some kind of blame for it in that they encourage doing the same thing over and over. But I think, in a lot of ways, it's the creators, the music makers. Like, so in 19, say, 75, 78, whatever, or even up into the early 80s,
Hmm.
the idea of using a drum machine was novel. It was something that nobody had really heard. Like, I remember um, hearing bands like Devo and the Cars in 1977, and they're playing this stiff, rigid boom boom da boom 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 da boom
Yeah.
boom. And I'm like, what the fuck are these guys doing? Blowing my mind. They were like robots. And Giorgio Moroder using the drum. I forget what drum machine they used on "I Feel Love," the Donna Summer song,
The
but
Lindrum was a Lindrum.
I don't know if it was a Lindrum. I feel like it was. Uh, well, there was an arpeggiator. Anyway,
Oh,
but
okay.
the idea that we had this now sequenced, programmed perfect time, metronomic time, and that didn't exist before that, and so it was fresh for a while, but then it just kept on going and going and going until you get to the 80s 90s when we start to get into using computers and uh, as a sequencer, where everything now we're looking to see if the kick and the bass drum are always perfectly lined up, and that the keyboards that come on the downbeat are exactly on the grid, and
Yeah.
uh, that's different than having a metronome play. Like some of my favorite records that existed in the like late 70s, early 80s, where the Lindrum first came out, what they would do was they would program the Lindrum as if it was a drummer. Like you were trying to emulate what a drummer would do, right?
Yeah.
And they would arrange it in a way that went with the song. So they'd put different drum fills here, different drum fills on the last chorus, and these kind of things.
Hmm.
But then they printed the drum machine stuff onto tape and played everything live on top of that. Right. So you
Oh,
basically had a
yes.
glorified metronome as your foundation, but everything else around it was played live, real bass. And, this is what Prince was doing and stuff like that.
Hmm.
And it's not until we get to about the mid 80s where sequencers, dedicated sequencers, and MIDI came into the game, where we now start to have the keyboards and a synth bass, or these kind of things now had to line up also,
Yeah.
and that's when the soul just starts floating away, and and now the modern records are very much just that on steroids, where everything it's not only the timing, it's the tuning, and the tuning of everything is perfect, and the effects of everything are perfect. It's like nothing just happens. Everything is fine tooth. There's no performances anymore. It's the illusion of a performance that's been microscopically assembled to make you feel like it was a performance,
Yeah.
and it's
Yeah.
a bummer.
And there's no like mistakes. I remember a song I did. I think, yeah, the one I sent you. There's a part in it when a guy was mastering it. He goes, there's on the bridge. There's a noise there, and I said, oh yeah, I kicked my guitar when I need my guitar when I was playing the acoustic when I was playing it, and I left it in. And he's like, why? I was like, oh, because it sounds cool. Like when
Yeah,
you hear it, you go, that's a bit weird. In
yeah,
the headphones, it's kind of like just a little kind of thing. And those things, I like those things. Whereas years ago, I think when I was, more kind of, not that I don't have a career, but, just kind of starting doing that kind of stuff, you'd be kind of conscious of that. You'd be like, no, everything has to be kind of perfect and it has to be this and has to be that. But those little mistakes are just cool because they're like, they
absolutely.
draw your ear.
And I have to blame in a lot of ways engineers, people like myself from generations past, because it's not only it's this idea that, oh, we start getting into the 70s, the very dead drum sound, where it was like, no, we can't have any leakage, nothing can leak into anything else, and we want perfect isolation for every instrument, and we're putting things between the hi-hat and the snare, but in order to get rid of any leakage between there, which
Yeah.
is impossible anyway. But you know what I mean, like to just have this total control, because we as engineers feel like that's a priority for us to be able to make decisions later rather than now. And before you know it, that records now take a hell of a lot longer to make than they did in 1956, when, like I said, they went in, they had a great arrangement, a great song, a great singer, and a great studio with great engineers and microphones, and everybody just went in, did it in 3 hours, and you were done. It was
Yeah.
over. You had the finished product basically ready to deliver.
Mm.
you know, and then it would be literally in on the radio or in record stores within weeks. You know, there was like you can't even get a mastering appointment in 2 weeks time in this. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah. It's not like that thing though. I think that's a kind of thing of life, of like the more you gain, when you gain something, you lose something. It's like Netflix, you know, you can watch any movie well, not every movie, but you know, you can watch a lot. But there was something so cool about going into a video store and kind of taking thing up and go, wow, what was that? Or some weird
Right.
horror movie and shit like that. And we kind of, I think sometimes the payoff that we think is good, because if you ask someone in the 90s, oh, you could have Netflix, and the idea of it, you're like, oh, that's amazing, and then you get it and it's like it's not as amazing as we kind of think it is, if you know what I mean.
We're in this age now with AI where you know I could conceivably in the next whatever 10 years have AI go play a perfect round of golf for me. You know what I mean? It's like if you ever played golf, you know that it's all about how fucking hard it is and the struggle of thinking one day that you've got it all figured out and then you come out the next day and you've completely lost the plot. You don't know, it's like you've never golfed before.
Yeah,
So it's the struggle is the thing. And by making these perfect sounding records and um, just refining and refining, it just takes out all the struggle. And
yeah,
that's where, you know, a lot of the all the beauty is. So we kind of just screwed ourselves out of a lot of stuff. And I think that's a reason why, it's not just an old guy saying back in my day, because I know I sound, because I am in a lot of ways, but there's, I know plenty of young, my daughter's like, 22, and we have all kinds of young musicians around here all the time. And I have these conversations with all these guys, and they confirm with me that no, they would rather listen to, Led Zeppelin or whatever it is from the 60s or the
yeah,
70s, um, for all the reasons we're talking about. They
yeah.
recognize and they appreciate it and they love it and they want to do stuff like that, but they find it hard to do that with the way we do things in this day and age. You have to really, it's not easy. They find out very quick. Oh no, you got to be really good. And if you're going to try and do it that way, you got to be really good.
Mm, mm, mm.
There's no kind of way around it. And so you got to spend all the time that you would spend now tweaking a mix. There's better spent on becoming a better songwriter and a better singer and a better performer. Just um, so it's funny. I see the musicianship level among young people is really high right now. I feel like it is.
Mm, mm.
So many amazing musicians, and I think a lot of that has to do with um, YouTube and being able to and Google, all these tools at your disposal to be able to actually
Yeah.
see. I mean, I can, and I can learn how to play any song right now by going onto YouTube and say, how do I play this? And somebody's out there showing me.
Yeah.
But you don't see that for like songwriting. There's nobody out there explaining to you how to, really write a better song or
That's true.
or arrange better. You know what I mean? So maybe that's coming because I see the interest in young people who, okay, they've gotten to be really great musicians, but now they're finding out like, yeah, but our songs still suck. You know?
Yeah.
So
But it's like a totally different kind of, way. Like I studied, I grew up playing classical music, and when you're in college doing classical music, there's a lot of people who can play like amazing, like, but they just can't really write, and
no,
I find that kind of strange.
they can't. The
Yeah,
improvisation is a whole other thing
yeah,
than being able to play. Written music.
yeah,
It's it's way way beyond, and that's like a skill that never gets old. I mean, it's unlimited. So I mean, I'm a big jazz fan, so
Oh, me too.
yeah,
Me too,
yeah,
bro. All those reissues that they're doing, like, is unbelievable. Like, you just have like Wayne Shorter stuff, and you have like I love I Quebec. It doesn't get enough credit, I Quebec, but I love I Quebec. But there's all those reissues that they started doing the last few years. They sound incredible. Like
yeah.
the Blue Note ones, like the Tone Poet ones. Have you heard those Tone Poet ones? Those
No,
oh dude, they're incredible. They're kind of the exact same mastering wise as the Blue Note 80th or whatever it is anniversary ones, but they're just kind of in more of those kind of fancy looking jackets, the vinyl jackets. But they
gotcha.
sound incredible. Like it's good that those records are getting, because that's what's cool about jazz is like sometimes it's like I think jazz is, you have Coltrane playing on a Miles record and Bill Evans. It's like if the Beatles started playing with the Beach Boys and all these kind of things, and that never happened. And I see jazz like that. It's like all these kind of guys who were playing on all these records, and incredible,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, it's
So
true.
good.
Because they're, because it's all about collaboration and having a conversation back and forth. So you got these geniuses talking back and forth, uh, and it's it's not protective. It's experimental, and it's inspired because they know, well, these guys are at a level where it's like that, everybody can do their own thing, and they're confident with what their abilities are. So just put yourself in a band with, you get, you know Miles and Coltrane, or Bill Evans, like all these just geniuses
Mm.
collaborating together, and it's mind blowing, and at the same time things were changing culturally that were inspiring, and there's the technology was assisting them, in a way that was maybe at the same pace, or I don't know. It wasn't overwhelming.
I get you, yeah.
Yeah, but once we get to about the 60s, and then surely into like we get once kind of computers and digital stuff starts to happen in the 80s, the rate of change and can can kind of overwhelm the creative process.
Yeah, yeah. Some of those 80s jazz records, I do not like the sound of them. It's just, especially the drum sound. It's like, oh, dude, no, don't be putting that big reverb on
Yeah,
that snare. It's like
yeah.
it's
I mean,
sacrilege.
most of the jazz records we're talking about from the 50s is like just one mic, maybe,
Yeah,
and simple is great.
yeah.
Introduce all these phase problems and balance problems. As soon as you start to separate everything out, you've got to put it back together again, and you end up putting it back together not as well as it was actually existed on its own.
Yeah, yeah. Speaking of records, jazz record, what jazz records do you like? Or just records in general, do like mean a lot to you?
Oh, just records in general. Well,
Or you can
gosh,
say jazz. Anything you want to say.
uh, I love Bill Evans, and I love Miles. Miles was kind of like my introduction to jazz, I would say. And when I was at Berkeley in Boston in the 80s. So that kind of, I'd never listened to jazz really, about as jazzy as I got.
Really?
Steely Dan, that was about it.
Okay, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Um, and, and I was introduced really in the kind of, the kind of later Miles. There was an album called We Want Miles that I loved. That was the one, because it had electric guitar and it was kind of loud, and so I kind of worked backwards from there.
Oh yeah.
And but it's funny because, like I said, as I get older, or as I've made more records, I just kind of want to look further and further back now. So I love listening to, like, Fletcher Henderson and things from,
Yeah, man.
Coleman Hawkins, and people from the 30s and 40s, where it's a whole other, you start to see what the arc of influence is over these decades. And I mean, Miles is a huge one,
Yeah.
starting from, the 50s onward. But Duke Ellington, and I'll just you know early bassy and I never liked big band. When I was at Berkeley, I hated it. I was like,
Really? Oh, I
yeah,
love it, man. I love
I
it.
thought it was corny. It made me think of the Johnny Carson band. That's to me what it was, and and then that's what it was in 1975 versus like 1945.
Yeah.
But so I really appreciate big band now more than ever. But yeah, but like I said, I love listening to anything that's pre overdubs when it's an actual performance. Louis Armstrong, I still just and Billie Holiday, I'll listen to all day long. Frank Sinatra, these yeah, they're not necessarily jazz, but they come from the jazz era, so there's a lot of jazz in it.
Yeah,
Uh,
the chords are very jazz like,
yeah,
sevenths and
they're all jazz
dominants.
musicians basically playing pop at the time,
Yeah,
but
yeah, yeah.
Motown is like that. Those are all jazz
Oh, so
musicians that
good.
are pop are playing R&B. So, but
So good.
it's like great bands, great songs, uh, great arrangements, great singers. That's what else do you need? I don't care if it's recorded really bad. If it's got all that stuff, so you listen to those recordings from the 30s and 40s, and they're horrible, you know.
Yeah, like Fats
But
Waller. This
they
is
sound great. They
yeah,
sound fantastic
yeah.
because
Like
you can hear what it is. There's nothing masking it. It's direct.
yeah, yeah. Even I think Fats Waller ain't no ain't
But
misbehaving. Like that sounds like from a technical point of view, it's not amazing, but the sound, it's so good, man. It's so
and
like you
in
can't.
a lot of ways, it's like the limitations of the technology at the time impart their own extra personality on top of what was going on musically. They're
Yeah,
synced up in this really cool way. Uh,
yeah.
yeah,
Have you ever seen that Bill Evans documentary, Time Remembered?
I don't think I have actually. No,
Oh
is
man,
that?
I'll send it to you. It's amazing. I can upload it for you on WeTransfer and send it to you. It's a
Oh
really good
yeah,
documentary. It's so good, man. Like Bill
talking about
Evans was
Porter.
such
That
a
Wayne Porter one is really great. I don't know if you've seen that one.
sorry?
You mentioned Wayne Shorter before. I don't know if you've seen the
Oh, the
Wayne.
Amazon one.
Yeah, that was a great one.
Yeah, that's class. And Ken Burns jazz
Yeah,
doc. That's so good, man.
every once in a while, I just have to put that on, just
Me too.
kind of comfort food, uh, you know, movies or whatever to watch. And it's Ken Burns jazz or Ken Burns baseball are I've still got my DVDs of the jazz. Uh,
Brilliant.
and even though I don't have a DVD player, but I still, I just remember it's like when the first time I saw it, I was like, I gotta have this. I have to be able to watch this over and over and over. And Mad Men is my other favorite comfort food.
Okay.
It's
Madman's
like,
quality, dude.
yeah,
Madman's
it's
quality.
and it's actually when you think about it, it's about that change kind of from that you know mono era into the stereo into the technological
Yeah.
whole transition that happened really in the 60s. It really sped up where it
Yeah.
was hard to catch up, and in a way that's what's great about the 60s is that it was like just revolutionary, all this change happening so fast that people's minds were just blown. And that's what you hear when you listen to Jimi Hendrix or anything from 66
Oh,
in
it's
70s. It's just like the people were going crazy with ideas and creativity.
yeah, it's incredible. My friend Phil, he recorded Hendrix, so he
This
sent
is
me
Phil
all
Brown.
these.
Of course, I
uh,
I love Phil Brown, and he used to do this tape op. It was
Oh,
parts from a book. Yeah, I
oh,
was like,
I love Phil Brown. He's like a good friend of mine, and we
I
he
watched it
sent.
with him, and it was really great.
Oh, did you? I
Yeah,
actually did a podcast with him last week again. I do always like, Phil, do you want to do a podcast? He's like, yeah, okay. 'Cause we just talk. I mean, I have to edit it because we talk for like 4 or 5 hours, so I
yeah.
have to edit it down. But he sent me all these like stems of Hendrix, or not stems, like sessions of Hendrix and Foxy Lady, and you can hear him going coughing on the thing just before, like it's in the actual recording.
Yeah.
And he's like clearing his throat, and then he's like, and then he's singing. It just sounds great, like, and just I love those stories. You know, you can like he was telling me, Phil was when he was young, he went in and just seen the Yardbirds recording, you know, in Olympic and stuff like that. Olympia, it's just like just
Yeah.
incredible. Like you're doing,
Yeah.
or Marion Faithfull's recording, and just
Traffic and stuff. Yeah.
yeah, just like those sessions. You've obviously heard "Spirit of Eden" by Talk
Oh,
Talk.
one of my favorite.
Me
All those
too.
Color of Spring and all, yeah, I love those.
Such
Yep.
an amazing record,
And
and it's quite interesting, like in a weird way, that it kind of was recorded in the way we would record now. You know, like it's like a band, a fake, not a fake band, but you know, they stitched everything together. You know, like they did
yeah,
all these
but
kind
it's
of
really cool how they did it with the one stereo pair of and the recording everything like that. So it's like that was kind of the link that the glue that glues it all together. It makes it
yeah,
not so pieced
yeah,
together.
yeah. I think Spirit of Eden still sounds like, I think it's one of the best sounding records I've ever heard. I think it's just a
It's like with
masterpiece.
5 seconds, you're like, oh, okay, I gotta listen. Yeah.
Yeah, it's totally like that. Like when that guitar kicks in on the Rainbow, you're like, oh.
Yeah.
I actually interviewed Tim for the podcast. I was so shocked he actually did it because he doesn't do interviews. Because I said to him beforehand, I was like, look, I don't need to talk about Talk Talk because I know you don't want to talk about it because you know whatever. And he brought it up during the interview, so we just started talking about the variophone. You know that crazy instrument that they used, that really weird. It's like a woodwind kind of thing, the variophone, and it's all over Color of Spring. And it seems they used it on Laughing Stock, and it's like a note held for like 22 seconds, but it's the variophone like fucking up, so going. So
Really?
yeah, yeah, man. It's just like I just love those records. Like it sounds so.
Yeah.
It sound-
I gotta listen.
Dude, am I talking too much? I'm sorry.
Not at all.
I
It's just
tend to blabber,
I,
man.
I watched a little bit, of some of your other podcasts, and I was like, oh, this is gonna be great because we'll talk.
Well, I think people when they talk to kind of engineers like yourself, they do get, I think a
They
lot of
think
them
that
are coming
think
from a,
about
yeah, yeah, they're coming from that perspective of just like it's all engineering. I think they kind of forget like engineering is a big part of music, but it's also the music is a big part of music. I think
yeah,
sometimes people lose that, don't
the
they?
last thing I really think about, but yeah, I'm much more inspired to talk about all the things we're talking about. That's like where all the good stuff is. That's we talk about this stuff for hours. So,
Yeah, man.
but yeah,
Always when after I do a podcast, I go, oh shit, man, I talk too much because like I have this, I don't know, you're probably, I don't know, you're the same, but I sometimes have like too many thoughts in my head sometimes, and then I say things at the same time, and I'm speaking something else. And I can say sometimes I see people when they're after the interview, they're like, what the fuck was he on about? And I'm like, oh shit, editing that, and I'm like, because I'm saying something and then I'm saying something else. It's just I don't know what the hell. So maybe something. It's I don't know. I kind of get that kind of way of like. Too many things and they're kind of overwriting each other sometimes. And I do notice when after I do the podcast, I'm like, oh shit, man, he probably thought I was nuts. You know what I mean? So there's that kind of
no,
thing. I actually
no,
had the Ron Carter on my podcast before.
yeah, I saw that.
Yeah,
Amazing.
man. That was the only podcast I was really nervous doing. I was really nervous.
Yeah, but
I
he's
was
a
really
super
nervous.
guy, huh? I mean, he certainly seems like it. But
Oh,
he'll talk
he's a
great.
lovely guy.
Yeah.
He put up a big thing on his Facebook about how he had a lovely conversation with me and all this kind of stuff. I was like, oh my God. I was like, shit, man.
Uh,
I was so touched because I was like, I was
I,
amazing,
I
you
remember
know?
once I commented on one of his posts on Instagram or whatever, and he wrote back and said something. I was just like, oh, Ron Carter commented on my comment. I was like, oh my God. Yeah.
Yeah, he's total dude. Because like those guys are like, there's not many of those dudes around anymore.
Oh,
I'd love to have talked to Wayne Shorter about comics because I know he's big into comics and I love comics and stuff like that.
oh, yeah.
And yeah, like such an interesting guy. Like his music is so, I think he's so underrated.
Oh man. Yeah. And Ron looks, I mean, I don't know how, I know he's well into his 80s, I know, but he looks like he's 65 and he's
Yeah, man.
just as active now as he ever was. It's so great to see. I love it. And
Yeah.
yeah, uh, That's an inspiring cat to have on your podcast. That's great. You must have been like freaked out when he said yes.
Oh, totally. I was like, is he sure about this? I think it was my third one, you know. I was kind of like, I wasn't, I wasn't, it was during COVID, you know, I kind of started it, you know, so because I've OCD. So during COVID, my OCD got really bad, you know, I was really in a bad, I got, diagnosed during COVID, you know, so it got
Yeah.
really bad then. It wasn't to do anything with COVID. It was just, it's such a weird story. I watched this. Do you know that show Legion? I don't know
No.
if you ever seen it. It's like a Marvel comic. It was really interesting though. It was made by the guy that did Fargo, that TV show. But
Okay.
it's really cool, really interesting. And the guy in it was like he said something, and then it kind of triggered me off, and then I kind of went into this whole weird, just I don't know why I'm saying that, but anyway, I've OCD, so it was kind of like I did the podcast during then, and it was like my third one, and I was like, oh shit, like because I'm not an interviewer, I just kind of talk to people, and I
Yeah.
was just like, oh no, what do I
Better.
kind of say? I didn't know really what to say, but yeah, he was cool, man. I was so nervous though, dude. I was just like, oh shit. Because I'm thinking of all these records he did, and you're like, oh my God, he played. I think he's the most recorded bassist ever.
Really? I
I
don't
think
doubt
so,
it.
yeah. I think so. I think he, you
Yeah.
know,
He did, pop records with Roberta Flack.
McCartney. Yeah,
Yeah,
with
McCartney.
McCartney, recorded McCartney.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah, amazing. Back to you. I know I'm kind of blathering here. Sorry. Um, um, what's the difference when how do you approach, we'll say, when you're mixing a record and then you're mixing for films like soundtracks and that? Is that do you have a completely different method of doing it, or is it the kind of
Yeah.
the same way?
No, well, yeah, film stuff is usually quite different. There's no vocal, so that's a big, I mean, most of the time there's no vocal,
Uh-huh.
so that's a big difference right off the bat. But also, the technically how I set up for it is going to be different because at the end of the day, I'm going to have to deliver usually 5.1 stems of everything, and so I will, bus everything beforehand, so that my kind of starting template for it is built to be able to deliver those stems with the click of a button,
Uh-huh.
Uh, so, but and then also, um, yeah, it's a different. Obviously, then you're also mixing with pictures, so you're looking at something that you're trying to support, as opposed
Hmm.
to just being, you know, um, in this open sea of whatever you want to do when you're doing a pop record. You just kind of do whatever you feel comes to mind. uh in a film, you're served, the idea oftentimes is to just not get in the way, and
Okay.
to know, um even though, I'm not actually mixing the film, I'm just mixing the music for the film,
Yeah.
but um it's just something that you're aware of more, that than when you're just mixing a record where you're like, oh no, we're just trying to get this song across. Usually the voice, what, and supporting the voice.
Yeah.
Uh, so
And like, so if you're doing like, strings, they can be quite kind of 2K, 5K. Would you be cutting much on those, or would you be automating things, or how would it work?
well, yeah, definitely riding stuff. But as far as EQ goes on strings, if I recorded them, and oh, and look, we have some of the best players and best rooms in town here. So if I recorded them, or even if I didn't really, um, I'm not going to try and mess around too much EQ wise. I'm probably just going to even make them a little bit brighter. Uh, and it's really comes down to the balance between the the spot mics and the Decatree and the other wides. So how much of a classic kind of sound you're looking for, as opposed to maybe something more modern, and that kind of depends on the style of the film. You know,
Yeah. Yeah.
Other stuff is going on, how much rhythm stuff and guitars. Sometimes there's, rock guitars happening and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So, but it's real, it's similar still in that you're just trying to find the emotional core of where it just makes you feel like you're moved and you feel, engaged, right? That's always
Yeah.
what you do, no matter what the music is, to find out what's the core here that we're trying to get to, and just make sure that it's coming through.
There's nothing better though than like an orchestra. You know, when you hear an orchestra, it's
So
just like,
great when you
dude,
record.
it's the coolest thing ever.
It's like when you because oftentimes when you're going to go to the score session, you got temporary tracks that have really sound amazing. Like, the composers here in town, at least, they have these amazing libraries where you're like, man, what, sounds great already. Why are we even gonna, you know, record it for real? We could just get away with this. And then you go and you do it for real, and you're like, oh man, as soon as they start, you're just like, there it is. It's just
Yeah.
like, it has something to do with the fact that it's all those microphones and all those players in this room that just, you're soaking it all. It's for all the reasons we were talking about about why records before overdubs were great.
Yeah.
It's that it's a moment you really feel like you're listening in on something that's happening right now, and uh and then they start playing, like, but even if you just hear the sound of the room as they're tuning up and talking, and you get on,
Yeah.
you hear that,
Yeah.
just that excitement that comes from that ultra high fidelity recording of a moment in time, and the rooms just sound glorious. It's, yeah, you feel like, sometimes you get that in real life. Like, I was out to dinner last night, and we were having, my friend was reading something, and it's just the four of us at the dinner table, but the room we were in just had this great sound to it. It was a big high ceilings, and um, tile floor, I think, and he's talking, and he's reading this thing, and as he's reading it, I just can't stop listening to the echo in this room, and I was recording this because it sounds,
That's brilliant.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah, man. I remember like when I did my first record, I went to Sweden to record an orchestra, Malmo, the Malmo Symphony Orchestra. And I'm there with all my sheets, all my scores that I wrote out. And I'm shitting it like, because I had never written for like 20 people before. And I'm just like, oh, fuck, what the hell am I doing? I'm like, oh, shit. And then when they played it, I was just like, oh my God. I forgot that I had written it, but I was
yeah.
just like, oh my God, it
That's
sounds
great.
so good.
Yeah,
Because I was just like, holy shit. And like all the colors you could that were going on. And it was just like, oh, it was just, as you even said, even them tuning up, I was like, dude, that sounds
yeah.
amazing. It's just like, that is one of the best experience of my life. Just an orchestra just going, because it was like you said, like like those sample libraries, they sound good, but a sample library will make you feel something, but an orchestra will make a real players will make you cry. Like there's sometimes I don't know, maybe because I'm getting older. Sometimes I hear a piece of music and I just kind of like cry. Like I heard, Joni Mitchell did this thing at Newport last, maybe 2 years ago or something like that.
Yeah,
And
oh, that, yeah.
she sung oh, what's that song? Na, 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 da, 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 da. Clouds Go By or something like that. And I just started
What, both
made me
sides
cry
now?
like.
Yeah,
Sorry? Both
both
sides now,
sides.
yeah. Oh,
Yeah,
dude. Like it was so much, it's way even better than the actual like
yeah.
recording, because it's just amazing. Like it's just do you get that like
Oh man,
you will hear a piece of music and just cry?
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
You know, that was an emotional thing. I mean, I saw that, kind of the day after it happened on YouTube, and I was like, and I showed my daughter, and I wanted to show people. I was like, man, look at this. This just happened.
I was the same.
Yeah, and yeah, it's amazing the power that music has over us like that, but it's really like something like that was a moment where you're like, man, this is a true moment happening right here, and Brandy kind of made that happen, put it together. And if you knew the story going into it, so much of it is context, but
Yeah.
so, we take these things we see in moments, and then we apply them to our own lives, and so, who of us, especially, someone my age, as you start to get up there, you look at something like this, and it just makes you think about the incredible arc of anyone's life, but particularly someone who's given so much, and then stuff gets taken away, and then they're able to still give back. It's like, it's really that's the big stuff that, in a lot of ways, music is trying to convey. A lot of the time, you tend to contextualize these kind of things, and particularly special moments like that, and you apply it to your own life, and you know uh, you start thinking about all the big the big ideas, and the you know
Yeah. Yeah.
what the meaning of all this is.
I do think that every day.
Yeah.
So, sometimes, I think I do. Were you like that when you're younger? I used to freak out my friends because I used to say to him, I used to say, I was like 7 or 8, and I would say to them, it's weird. The thought of dying is because you're not going to you're don't exist, but the thought of not existing is equally as disturbing as the thought of never not existing. They're both
Yeah.
two dichotomies that are kind of disturbing at the same time, because to live forever is odd, and then to not live forever, to not exist, is equally odd.
Yep. Or to never have existed. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you know what, we're talking about this age of AI, and the idea. We were talking about the '60s and how fast things were progressing at that time, and I think we're like just at the beginning of another revolution like that. Like, we're in 1961 right now. You know what I mean? Where it's
Yeah.
like the big changes are just around the corner. To the idea that, like, I'm sure you know who Ray Kurzweil is,
Yep.
and I saw a thing not too within the last year, and he was in doing an interview, in front of an audience, and the moderator asked him. He said, "How many people in this room do you think can live to be 500 years old?"
Ooh.
And he said, and maybe it wasn't 500, but whatever, 300, hundreds of years old. And he said, "Well, how many people will be in this room will still be here in 5 years?" And
Yeah.
I was like, 5 years? And if you know Ray Kurzweil's track record on this
Yeah.
stuff, pretty on. So, the idea that the exponential, is just about to take off on this, and that if you can hang out for another, 5-10 years, the idea that we could keep going for who knows how long, but we're basically all vampires living for hundreds of years, indefinitely. That how much of everything that we know and do is affected by that. It's just beyond belief. So, how do we deal with that? And
I know.
and yeah, it's just crazy, but it's
Tree,
exciting.
even
Sure.
the rate though of, I do mess around with AI videos and stuff, just messing around, so that, doing stuff like that. And what you could do last year compared to what you can do now is just insane. Like, it's
Yeah.
like you said, the growth is just so quick. It's like insane how quick it is. And because it's AI, like, it's a constantly evolving thing. Even if you chatted to Chat GPT a year ago, it kind of has inflections the way it talks now. It's very
Right.
it's very
Right.
it's very strange.
It is getting kind of scarily familiar. You know,
Yes.
like,
Yes.
there's like people now. If you feel like they're people.
Yeah, it's yeah, because like you're having conversation and then you're like, oh, sorry. I was like, wait a minute, I'm saying sorry to, like, because it's kind of,
Yeah.
we kind of, humans view everything with regards to the way we view things as humans. You know, we don't like I was asking an AI, I was like, what's it like where you are? You know, like what is it like? Is it a space? You know, 'cause it's bizarre
Yeah.
because it is somewhere and we think in terms
What
of
was
our
the
brains.
answer?
It was like I don't I am nowhere but I'm here and I was like, oh, that's weird.
Yeah. Sure.
Oh, that's weird. I asked AI, I was like, what's a question no one's ever asked you before? And because the AI said, well, I can only concentrate on this, no, it's a concentrate, but if I had a conversation with that AI today and then had the same one tomorrow, it can't remember it. It will restart the conversation. So it will
Uh,
give you the information that you have, but it's
right.
almost like it has a weird amnesia about the conversation. It's
Right.
very
Right.
strange.
Thought about that, but that's true.
You know, until it doesn't, let's put it that way.
But at the same time, it's constantly learning, right? So you would think that the process of learning involves cognition of what happened previously. So, um, or is it just constantly updating from it just better interpreting all the available data in that moment as
Yeah.
opposed to actually learning, which is mean like retaining information. You know what?
Yeah.
Or
Yeah.
is it constant up update of
Yeah.
available, and it's just more and more is available at every given second.
It's mad, dude, isn't it? When you
Yeah,
think about it,
that
it's just
is.
mad.
Yeah.
It's just fucking it's crazy. I wonder how it's going to affect. Like, I wonder will it get to a point where it like would affect like basketball or baseball or something. I know that sounds weird, but like if you think about it, like are you a big baseball fan? Yeah.
I'm a huge baseball fan.
So you would obviously know more than I would about baseball, but like there has to be like tactics and stuff like that, you know, well, if like to do. So if an AI could write like tactics for a team or something like that, and
Yeah.
which team has the best AI program that like, it'll completely change the game
Well,
of baseball.
that if you've ever seen, there's a great movie called Moneyball with Brad
Oh,
Pitt.
it's brilliant.
Yeah, but that's the beginning of this kind of revolution where computers start to inform management decisions and the actual game being played as far as who's playing and what there's.
Yeah,
It's all stats driven, and basically AI is stats at any given moment, but also there's a predictability factor. So yeah, I mean, I remember oh not even 3 or 4 years ago having a conversation with somebody and we were talking about AI at that time.
mm.
And I'm thinking about my kids and what's kind of future for them, what kind of jobs will be available for them. And I thought to myself, well, anything that's really human, like you know dancing and songwriting and music and photography and all these kind of arts places are safe, right? Because we will value that human element to it. And then when I see photographer, a photographer, you're there's no need for a photographer anymore. I mean, not that there's no need for it, but it's uh, the what's available instead of photography now is just unbelievable. And so and then I know, and I thought, oh, okay, my job as a mixer is probably pretty safe because, and it's like, man, I don't know if there's any safe
No,
places.
no.
Um, yeah, like sport. I thought sports, are untouchable, but like I said, the idea that an AI can help me go play a perfect round of golf somehow is like, well, then what fun is it to play a perfect round of golf if if it can do it for me? You know what I mean? It's the competition, it's the struggle that is what we're there for. We're
Yeah,
trying we're trying to overcome. In baseball, as you know, you know, uh, uh, getting 3 hits out of every time, every 10 times at bat, 3 out of 10 is Hall of Fame level. You know what I mean? That means
yeah,
missing 7 times out of 10. And that's what it's about, right? And so that when you see guys like right now in LA, we have this amazing Japanese player named Shohei Otani, who's like he's like the new Babe Ruth. He's like nobody's ever seen someone who can play like this guy.
Really?
Oh, he's incredible. It's unbelievable, and I can't wait for today's actually opening day for baseball, for the Dodgers at least, and uh, it's like it's an exciting thing to see someone break these barriers that you thought nobody could do this. You could, but that's what sports is all about, and that's in a lot of ways what music is all about, and any all these arts is like these ideas of finding a way to express something that nobody's ever done before, that's completely new and original and insightful and makes you see things differently,
Yeah.
what but where can we be? I don't know. When I don't know. They talk about us basically having the equivalent of AI and Google information in our brains, to where we're all smarter because we have all this knowledge directly linked to our brains, so that we don't actually have to think about things. That this database is there for our, like we become AI, and
We're like the Borg then. You're not
yeah,
original. You're kind of just there's nothing original about it. You're just a clone of another person.
and we're all sharing the same knowledge all the time.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
what is unique about that then? So I don't know where it goes, honestly. It's I have to think that being unique somehow becomes uh an embraceable value. It's something that we strive for, to
Yeah.
what makes you different than me, which kind of goes against what our thoughts have been for the longest time, which is like, oh no, we're all the same. We're all basically the same, and we're all human. And it's like,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, okay, but what makes us different?
Yeah. Yeah. I asked the AI, I was like, could AI make another note? Like, we have a scale, and could they make another note? And the AI was like, oh, that's an interesting concept. Because we in our we always, as humans, we tend to look at everything from a human perspective because that's all we kind of know. So if there was a note that was there, we couldn't make it because we can't comprehend it, if you know what I mean. So an AI would have such a different way of learning because it doesn't think like us. So it could actually make another. I suppose you could get into
You're talking about
microtonal.
musical note. Is that what
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. I asked it, could it make another like note of a scale, and the AI was like, yeah, that could. It's interesting. Not at the moment. And I said, but you're from a human perspective. If you asked it from another perspective of like an AI, could it do it? And they it was like possibly yes. And I was like, whoa, that's kind of interesting. Like, because like it, like we always do tend to think of like things, for us, that's the notes. But if something's way more intelligent than us and made a note that I know you could get into the whole of microtones and then in between notes,
Yeah.
but I'm actually said an actual new note, which
Right.
is like it's not out of the I know I'm sounding insane here, sorry, but it's not
No.
out of the it's not out
Right.
of the conceivable realm that it could happen. You know what I mean? That could happen, that there's a new note. We're like, holy shit, what's that?
Well, we you know as humans, up until now, we've always kind of redefined what music is. You know what I mean? Like that's a an ongoing pursuit, and Miles was big in that fact. Ornette Coleman, like the idea of free jazz. When it
Yeah,
first came out, all these revolutionary points where when jazz first came out. And this is only going back 100 years, so there's a whole centuries before. But the idea of these blue notes and things in between, and doing voices that were more like instruments, and free. And then so you have free jazz that comes out, and then you've got say rock and roll the idea of distortion introduced in sounds, and people, the reaction to all these things, and rap when DJ, scratching first started in the 70s, and punk rock, and even rapping in general, was like people's idea of these things when they first come out. It's like, that's noise, that's not music, that's you
Yeah.
you put it outside the box of what's considered music. Like, so I've done some Atmos mixing and some other recordings of ambient music. And
Ah.
there's this like Brian Eno's introduction of ambient, what we call ambient music now, was new, and people was like, that's not music. It's like, that was a recategorization of what we might find entertaining. You know what I mean? It's like
Yeah.
not even entertaining, or just interesting, right? And so in this ambient categories, they have these categories, subcategories of environmental, which tend to feature natural sounds, birds and rivers, and babbling brooks and stuff. And then there is spa stuff, which tends to have like wind chimes and bowls and all these kind of things. But then one of the other subcategories is noise, right? Which features things like vacuum cleaner hum, and refrigerators, and like, just like noise, right? And so there's this, you can go on Apple Music, and you'll hear, and I did this because I'm doing kind of researching some of these things, and
Yeah.
I get one track of, it's a song that's released, right? And whatever, it's 5 minutes long, and then they had these subcategories where it's the same song, but with bowls or with bird sounds and stuff for environmental. And then you get to this noise category, and the whole track is just pink noise. That's it. It's like, that's a song, pink noise. And it's 5 minutes, whatever the same length was of the other songs, of pink noise. And I'm like, people are getting royalties on freaking pink noise. But it's like, what's considered music? I don't know. And that will continue to change, I'm sure, and be shaped by things like AI, and what maybe we uniquely hear that's different than they can conjure up. I don't know.
Yeah. It's like, you ever listen to those ASMR stuff where
Yeah.
people will that's a, like, they get huge
You-
views on those things of, like,
Yep. I remember when I was a kid, my dad had a little Philips cassette recorder. It was like
mm,
a used for dictation or whatever, right?
yeah.
And but when I found this, I was like, oh, I can record. I went to town on this thing. I just carried it around with me all the time. And I would do things like just put it in the living room, press record, and go away, and if the tape was 30 minutes long or an hour long or whatever. And then I'd come back, and when it was done, and then I'd just go and listen to it. And I was so intrigued by, like, oh, like, this is where the dog's barking, or the phone's ringing, and my Aunt Harriet's calling my mom, and they're talking on the phone. And it's like, there's just all these life things going on that I just found interesting to just listen to,
Yeah. Yeah.
and and it would be just, every day the doorbell rings, and the something falls, and it's like things are happening, and you're just listening to these things that are happening and feel like they're I was just
Yeah.
blown away by that. That's what got me into just recording in general.
Really?
Yeah, for sure.
That's
Uh,
cool, man.
yeah, I was just like, I remember the first time I was in a band when I was 13, 14,
Mm.
and I met this other guy in my high school, and he had went to his house to play, and we kind of had three or four of us play, and he had a Sony quarter-inch reel-to-reel and a little Radio Shack 4-channel mixer, and he had a mic on his piano, and a mic on the drums, a mic on my guitar, and a mic on the bass or the vocal or whatever. But maybe he had 6 channels, whatever. But he had this little mixer that I had never seen like a mixer before, and we recorded the Eagles' "Best of My Love," right?
Oh, cool.
And I remember hearing it back, and it sounded so good. There was this quality, and it had to do, I'm sure, with the whoa and the flutter and just the saturation and all the things that come when you go to a tape machine like that. It just sounded so real and professional, like that's us. That believe that's us. It sounds like a record. And that totally got me into it. I was like, whoa, this is so, I somehow talked him into bringing that to my house, bringing that tape machine to my house for our next, rehearsal.
Yeah.
And you can just leave it here because we're going to rehearse again next Tuesday. So just leave it here. And then I would, use it to record stuff. And then I ended up going back and forth between that and the cassette machine that I had and do
Class.
Yeah. But yeah, that sense of being able to relive a moment, like you mentioned binaural mics. I remember the first time I got into binaural recording, and I had this, headset kind of binaural mic thing, and it plugged into a cassette machine, I think. And I would just go around recording the same thing. Just I'm walking around, I'm hanging out with my family and meeting people and stuff, and I just had them in my ears and recording. They probably didn't even know I was recording. And then I'd go back and listen to it with the headphones, and it was like reliving that moment. Because if you've ever used binaural, if you've ever recorded with binaural mics on your head,
Yeah.
it's very different than using like the Neumann head or
Okay.
because it's actually your head. And when you listen to your shape, it's like you're right there again. It's scarily accurate because it's your head. That's how binaural works. It's like because the KU100 and any binaural existing microphone like that is just a generalized human head, of a certain density and a certain shape, and but everybody's is different. And that's why some people, when they listen to, like in Atmos, we have these binaural representations. Some people listen to it and it's mind blowing. And some people listen to it and they're like, it just sounds like stereo to me. They don't hear any kind of spatial. And it really has to do with that it's not compatible with their head shape. And so now they've gotten into this thing where you have, and this has been around for years, but you can get a personalized, what they call it, HRTF, where you can get a model of your head so that it better translates to your personal profile. And that technology is getting really pretty good. And I think it hasn't kind of made it out too big to the consumer yet, but I think that's coming in the next few years because so many people listen on headphones. I mean, that's the world, so when you can get a really accurate representation for any consumer that can kind of blow your mind like that, I think that's when people really start to take notice. Right now, but on, like I said, you may or may not get a really special experience or not.
Before I let you go, I know I've talking too much. I'm sorry. What got you into baseball?
Oh, I played baseball as a kid. I love baseball.
Oh, did you? Yeah.
Oh yeah, I wanted to be a professional baseball player.
Really? Yeah.
Yeah. I was pretty good. I was a pretty good pitcher, like growing up and into high school, and I even played a little bit past high school. But I remember at, kind of at that same age, 14, 15, 16, I was also getting into music at the time. And so the two things I did were play in the band and play baseball, at least when the weather was good. And I mean, still to this day, it's baseball and music. But
Really?
yeah, sure. But I remember the coach, because doing rock and roll, he didn't like my hair was getting longer, and he could tell that he knew that I was in a band and I was playing at shows and stuff. And he said, if you're serious about this, you got to think about where your priorities are and what you
Yeah.
want to. But and at that point, I really hadn't considered. I just liked doing both, and I hadn't really considered that I can only do one or the other.
Yeah.
And I remember kind of when he said that, I thought to myself, I do want to be a baseball player, and I really at that time thought I could, but then I really thought about it, and I was like, well, what are the odds that I could be in the major leagues? It's really hard to get into the major leagues, and but I was in a band, and I thought, well, it's also really hard to be a rock star,
Yeah, that's true.
So
Both equally hard.
yeah, seeing a thing somewhere like being a baseball player, a professional baseball player, is like one of the hardest things, uh, you know, uh, uh, percentage wise, of people who get into it, who actually get to the major leagues. There's way
Right.
more rock stars than baseball players.
Wow.
Yeah,
That's
it's really hard.
interesting.
Yeah. So thankfully, I did make the right decision back then. But
Yeah,
even
I
to be
think
a
it
rock
worked out well.
star. But I remember also then coming to that bridge was like, well, do I really think I have what it takes to be a rock star, or like maybe I could just work in the studio? That would be good, because
Yeah.
I like recording, and then I don't famous or any of that stuff. So um, maybe I want to be a recording engineer, and that's when that light bulb went off, and then that be a good thing. Just kind of happened to coincide with the beginning of of scholastic institutions having these programs in Berklee College of Music, where I ended up going. They had just come out with a program for what they called music production and engineering. It was a new
Oh,
thing. Got this
wow.
year. So, and now, as you know, there's recording schools everywhere. So that was kind of a new thing. I
I
got the right time.
I think it worked out well for you. I think it worked out. I think
Far so
pretty
good.
good. Pretty good.
Only half it.
Have you ever seen that I'm like, I'm dying. I've never been to a baseball game, and at some stage I'm like, I have to go to a baseball game. I'm not
Oh,
saying that I know loads about baseball, but there's something fascinating about it when I see the whole thing. It's like, oh my God. Did you ever see that Robert Redford movie, that baseball one? I can't think of the
yeah,
name of it. What,
yeah, one of the great ones. Yeah,
what's it? Yeah, what's it called?
natural. Yeah,
Yeah, oh, that's a
yeah.
class movie, dude.
I'm doing an interview. Oh, sorry. Yeah, it's okay.
Oh,
My wife.
sorry. Yeah, that's such a good movie, dude. Oh
Yeah.
yeah.
No, I mentioned Moneyball before. I think that's my favorite baseball movie. There's a lot of great ones. But the reason why I like it so much is because most baseball movies are like The Natural, where they're really romantic, and
Yeah.
it's there's a love story going on, and
Yeah.
all this other backdrop, and baseball is just kind of the backdrop to a normal Hollywood arc,
I
right?
get you. Yeah, I
Yeah.
get you.
Whereas Moneyball is actually about real baseball,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
and about what the players are thinking and going through, and what the management, and I found it fascinating. So that's one of my favorite. That's pretty much my favorite baseball movie. Yeah.
Yeah. That
And
there's a class documentary.
if you're ever in LA during baseball season, I'll take you to Dodger Stadium. You got to see the
Oh,
Dodgers.
dude, thanks very much. Yeah, that'll give me an excuse to go to LA sometime.
Yeah. Yeah.
Man, that must be amazing. I'd say it's class. Like, do you go very often to
Oh,
see
as
the
often as
Dodgers?
yeah, I
Oh,
go.
really?
Yeah, I'm going next week for the first game this year. I usually I go a couple of times a month. So during the baseball season, which runs from about beginning of April, end of March to October, is when the World Series and all that stuff
Hmm.
starts. So basically, the end of September. I'll probably go to about 10 games maybe
Oh wow,
here.
that's
Yeah,
awesome.
I love
That's
it.
is the vibe just really cool? Like it must be just
Great.
everyone's.
Particularly I mean, last year the Dodgers won the World Series,
Yeah,
and
I seen that.
they're like, and this year they're even better. They have on paper, they have an even better team than they had last year. So it's super exciting as a Dodger fan. There's
Wow,
never a team more exciting team than they've had this year and last year. It's so great. Can't wait.
brilliant,
Yeah.
brilliant. So you're a happy man.
Well,
You're happy out, so you're happy out. Hey, well, Dave, man, hey, thanks so much for like taking the time to talk to me. I really appreciate your time.
this was a really fun talk. I'm sure we could have talked for 2 more hours. So
I know, I know, I know. So, apologies if I.
no, it was great, great conversation, and like I said, we talked about so much other good stuff, you know, besides the low end. So that's great.
I didn't get to the low end, man. I'm sorry.
We'll only talk about the low end. No, it was,
I've written in caps on a sheet saying "talk about low end." It's
it's really great to talk with you, and do it again.
oh, dude, I'd love that. I'd love that. All right. Thank you very much, Dave, and I'll be in touch.
All
Cheers,
right, Paul.
man. Have a
Cheers.
great day.
You
Cheers,
too.
brother. Bye
Bye.
bye.